Hi, good afternoon. Welcome to DSSC Ideas Lab. The series is back after a while, but we're so thrilled to be here with a new segment of conversations around playbooks that deserve a decode. Now, you may have noticed a slight edit in our name. May I please present to you our gentle tweak and rebrand? Say hello to DSSC Ideas Lab. Now, our core remains, the very same. But we used a good part of this year to reorganize ourselves, refresh our SOPs, strengthen our core structure, and offer more clarity on our ways of working. Basically, what we did was we did the most thorough Diwali cleanse for our own brand. Now, whether you're a product focused brand or a service led company, if you have a brand challenge, then we have an idea for you. Basically, our research backed solutions and B2C kind of social experiments, they help brands from, across industry with strategy, marketing, digital content, and event curation. Now, you can hit us up on www.dsse.co or just drop us an email on hello@dssse.co and we'll get back to you. Now, my name is Shreya Soni and I'm your host for today's episode of Suyod 4. Welcome to episode 58. Thank you everyone for who's joining in. Now, my guest for today is someone I have never had the pleasure of meeting in person, but I feel like I know heaps of her courtesy her artistry. I've always eyed her work, and about 3.5 years back, I invested in my first piece from her collection. She's been extremely kind in dressing me up from her brand new collection today called Zahia. Her brand almost clocks in an impressive milestone of 20 years in the Indian fashion industry, and I'm very curious to finally meet her and chat about this award-winning brand that she heads that is loved for its minimalistic chic luxe. Now, please welcome Priyanka Modi. She's the founder and creative director of AMPM. Before we get her online, there's some quick house rules for today's session. All opinions shared on this platform are personal takes and opinions. I do encourage you to take everything in the right context and good spirit. We don't mean to offend any sensibilities. So any concerns or constructive feedback, we're all ears. You can drop us a DM on Instagram or just email hello@dsse.co. If you have a question for Priyanka, just drop it on this live ticker here and we'll address them in the second half. Give me a second as Priyanka, I'm very excited. Hi,
Hi, Shreya.
how are
How are
you?
you? Very well. Thank you for
I'm
such
just
a
going to
warm
say
welcome.
happy Diwali for another month so that it justifies all the eating and drinking. How
And
was your
thank you for
Diwali
such a
break?
warm welcome, Shreya. I just heard that. Thank you so
Oh,
much.
good.
Diwali was superb. It was a lot more quiet than it is generally,
Yeah,
but it was
yeah.
lovely nevertheless with the family.
Oh, good. Priyanka, can I just say this is the first time we're meeting and I'm so excited.
Yes, we are e-meeting, and I
Yeah,
think it's a new trend.
mandate for the year. Okay, so
Absolutely.
Priyanka, one of the things that stayed with me from our first chat on the phone was
Right.
about your childhood. It was so lovely hearing you talk about your early understanding
Right.
of art, design, fashion, architecture via the lens of your grandparents.
Right.
And for me, that was a real big takeaway. Can you tell us a little bit more about that time and how that has contributed to your present?
So, okay. So, going back to my childhood, I grew up in Kanpur, in this small little place, in a very protected Marwari family. And it was only until much later, Shreya, that I hadn't realized that the impression that my grandparents had, of course, in building values, that is one thing, but how their sense of dressing created such an impression that it led me to a career choice. I realized that much later in my, in my school years, that it was coming from there. So about my grandparents, and I'm glad you found that interesting, that piece of information, because all of my childhood, I saw this obsession for clothing and lifestyle through the lens of my grandparents' eyes. And especially my grandfather, he was such a Brit at heart. He would obsess about clothing right from his morning walks to which shade of blue he would wear to the office, which tie had to be carried with it, which tweed jacket would go with which, cashmere sweater. Even his walking stick, he was so particular about which one he wore, which clothing. It was just crazy. And God forbid if there was an event in the house, or there was a do or a dinner or a party, then he would bring the house down. He would get the family to put the perfect look together.
That's a good learning for me, considering I've basically, Nikalo the entire year in the same pair of sweatpants. So that's really good learning for me right away.
Yeah. And anybody who would travel around the world, he would make sure that, they're getting his perfect piece of clothing from his favorite brands around the world. He would just leave nobody so that he could get the perfect shade and perfect brand, the perfect color from wherever, whichever brand that he sort of loved and imbibed in his daily clothing. And even my grandmom, very minimalist. She was a big minimalist, very elegant, a lot more quiet about her passion for fashion. She wasn't like my granddad, who would drive everybody up the wall. But very, she would always be dressed in these classic South Indian weaves. She would just, put herself together so minimally. It was so elegantly. It was, of course, a pleasure to watch her. Then my mom, in her immaculate French chiffon saris, her string of pearls. So I saw all of that over so many years. And even how the house was done, it was just so minimally done with just what was required. Nothing more, nothing less. And
I want to say a big part of like that conversation, what I gathered from it was that there's this like keen sense on quality. And there's also this keen kind of like takeaway on high utility. Keep it minimal, that's not a problem, but let it look, and let it serve a purpose. And I found that kind of like so gripping in that conversation. And that was quite interesting.
Yeah. It was just the way they dressed. It was just the presence was felt. There was nothing loud about it. It was just, they would just be effortless and elegant. And, you could see that the effort that's gone in actually to put something together and to keep it most illustrated. So I think that's what I absorbed throughout my childhood. And I think, I landed up sort of.
And you carry that forward now.
Yes, absolutely.
It's so interesting because I was researching. You started in the early 2000s. Now, just kind of like rewind that a decade back. Now, the early 1990s, basically, the early 90s saw the economic liberalization of our economy, and it kind of like really had significant bearings across industry. In many ways, it propelled the fashion industry. Whether we're talking in terms of the metrics being volume or it being in terms of like the trends, there was an exciting period of growth in domestic retail, as well as an influx of outsourced business from international quarters. Now, you and Ankur, you started the brand AMPM in the subsequent decade. I want to understand from you, what evolution have you already seen? What path had already been paved that prompted you to, start the business?
So this is now a couple of decades back that we're talking about, Shreya.
And congratulations on that. It's a
Yeah, I
milestone.
know it's been quite the journey. But at that time, there was one clear dichotomy when we were getting into this industry, Shreya. And that was that there were these two diverse aspects of the industry. One was, of course, that the Indian established couturiers who did Indian traditional wear.
Yeah.
That was one
Yeah.
segment, one very clear segment. And then the other extreme segment was the off the rack Western wear,
Yeah.
which was
Yeah.
led by brands like Benetton, etc. So when I came back after my education, I saw this very clear void, which was not being fulfilled at that time. And I personally didn't subscribe to either of these aesthetics. So as a consumer, I realized that if I don't subscribe to either of them, then there must be a big segment that must be not sort of subscribing to the same. And so took up the challenge to make Indian heritage a lot and express it in a product that was a lot more contemporary. I thought if I could fulfill my own need, then I would be further fulfilling another segment's need. And it was, of course, the path was unclear at the time, but it was a challenge that I wished to take on, and then started AMPM.
No, it's so interesting because you very correctly point out. So my understanding, and you're the pro here, so you should be correcting me on this. But the early 2000s,
Right.
late 90s, early 2000s, I found that Indian fashion was kind of like by and large oscillating between this opulent designer wear that you can correctly point out,
Absolutely.
and then this mass-produced, economical fashion, lighter on the pocket. But where was that in between,
Yeah.
it feels like the more I studied your brand and the more I spoke with you, it felt like it was a gap in the market. But more than that, it felt like you were building a solution for a very personal problem. And
Absolutely.
that kind of like prompted the birth of the brand.
Yes.
And can
Absolutely.
you like kind of map out, say, for example, what were the first kind of like 5 years? Because I think there's so many entrepreneurs who kind of watch the show. And I think the first 5 years are typically like, you get all the teething pains, all the kind of like cramps and aches once you
Yes.
kind of get the hang of it. So what were those first 5 years like?
They were of course, the building years, and
Yeah.
everything that we did was more in our own minds. It wasn't articulated. It was just an instinct that you felt. You knew what you wanted to, you knew what you wanted to achieve, but it wasn't well articulated. The seed was sown, but the clarity came along those 5 years. It is for any brand, and I see a lot of young designers do that today. And I think they have such a sense of maturity that today they are a lot more well-rounded than when we started out. That time there was not much of a comparison. There weren't these clear paths rolled out. The Indian industry was not exactly organized. So there weren't these, competitor brands that you could learn so clearly from, and have a clear path rolled out for you. So we
Fair
started to
play.
make
That's
our
quite
own rules.
interesting. Yeah, and
Yeah.
in fact, like, so many people who've been on the show and I have kind of ticked off those 10 years, 15 years, 20, 25 years in the trade. And this is across industry. One of the key takeaways that I always hear is that, you know, today there seems to be a rule book, an unsaid rule book of sorts, where you have that, you know that you need, say, for example, a very clear brand book. You
Right.
need a communication, you need a design language, you need like, what is the tone of language that we're going to employ right down to the label of the garment that you're wearing. Forget just your online communications. And I feel like a lot of that was probably present. I don't think the new crop of brands have invented it. It was always present, but it wasn't as kind of like sketched out or etched out say 15 years back. Do you agree with that? Or do you feel, no, in our own way, everyone is doing exactly what you're doing now?
No, that's not true at all. Like I said, that there weren't hardly any industry comparatives. It is only when FDCI as a body was
Yeah,
formed, that's
yeah,
when people
yeah,
got the designer segment, especially, which was,
yeah.
they got a direction and a voice. That
Hmm.
platform helped designers build an industry that belonged
A
to
more
designers.
cohesive. Yeah.
Yes, it made it, yeah, the designers didn't have a platform to sort of showcase
Hmm.
their clothing, to find a voice that was,
Yeah,
wanting to be said. And
yeah.
no, and I don't think it was that refined and defined, Shreya. I don't think there were the brand manuals, there weren't clear guidelines. So like I was
Hmm.
saying, that we had to make our own rules. There weren't
Yeah, yeah,
so many clear
yeah.
comparatives to study from, and that was
Fair.
exciting. It was, of
Yeah,
course,
I would imagine that that'd be quite
fascinating.
exciting because you get to kind of define the nitty-gritties,
Yes.
of your reality. Yeah,
Yes. And whenever I look back on the journey, I still remember the one tailor that I started with in the
yeah,
smallest room that was possible. And that time you didn't know what the next steps were, but it was
yeah,
most
yeah,
exciting anyway. And for Preth to
yeah.
see scale, that's what we were targeting for. For a
Hmm.
Pret brand, there were no designer Pret brands. So it was a
Fair. Yeah.
complete challenge of sorts. We didn't even know that we had the market size at that time. We didn't know that whether
Hmm.
this would scale at all. But it was a challenge that we were just ready to
Yeah,
take on. It was just purely out of uh,
yeah.
instinct, that you knew that it would pan out all right, but you were experimenting, and that was fun too.
Hmm.
uh, and
Hmm.
I think any brand, and I think the younger brands today are in a better place. They're in a better place because they can learn from what didn't work for the others as well. At that time we
Hmm.
didn't have that learning.
I can
uh,
imagine a lot
you
of the
had to.
younger brands like vigorously shake their head because they feel like, the playground keeps changing so drastically and so
Very
quickly
true.
that I
Very true.
sometimes feel like even sometimes our case studies from, 3 years, as tiny a time frame as that when you're kind of trying to map consumer behavior, 3 years is nothing. But I find a lot of our internal projects, what we kind of like rolled out 3 years back versus what we're hoping to achieve for brands today,
Yes.
it's chalk and cheese, and the playground keeps like changing so rapidly.
Very true. Very
And
true.
I find that quite surprising. So, Priyanka, I'm so glad that you kind of like brought about, the lack of an evolved or like a set kind of market or that consumer segment that you were building for, because I am so curious to ask you this. So uh, I come from a family that really treasures saris. Both my mothers, they champion local textiles and weaves, and they have, like, I want to say, hands down, two of the most drool-worthy collection of saris. And I want to say every daughter is going to say that, saying, yeah, 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 even me, our mother does. But by virtue of that, most of my saris were either inherited or, hugely influenced by their design philosophy, or I got those, heirloom must-haves when I got married.
Mhm.
And as stunning as each of those pieces are, you don't get to wear them as often. So the utility and the functionality of it, for me, there was always a big gap there. And as embarrassing as it is to admit, it was only this year that I bought my own very first sari. And it's like this molten gold, chanderi silk, no embellishments, in my mind, hugely versatile. And for the very first time, it was a sari that I thought was very me. And this is something that I hear repeated quite often within my, kind of age segment. And that got me to think that, today's fashion consumer segment, it's extremely diverse. We're seeing the slice kind of broaden for, say, the conscious shopper. In the last 5 years, we've also seen a younger audience, which with a significantly larger disposable income. I want to ask you if catering to the audience or the target audience that you always have been catering to, did it ever feel like a risky move, whether that's now or, 20 years back?
A risky move in terms of what we do now, or
Because
the
it wasn't a very clearly defined market, right? It's a consumer that I want to say has kind of found its own voice and tone
right.
very progressively and very slowly over the years.
Absolutely, absolutely. So, like I said, Shreya, it was absolutely risky even then.
Yeah, that's what I want to ask. Like, how did you kind of develop your business model, knowing that the customer or the end consumer of the product is going to be a niche one? It exists, but
Right.
it will be one that you will have to kind of educate on the way.
Yes. So when we started out, of course, there was a clear risk that we were taking. My mother-in-law belonged to a very established segment. I mean, in the sense that she did
Yeah.
couture, and
Yeah.
she knew that she had a clear market. And even then, it wasn't as if the consumer pie was so big that they
Yeah.
subscribed to designer wear to start with. Designer wear also had just a certain
Yeah.
segment.
Yeah.
So when she heard that we are trying to do something that is not embellished and that is
Yeah.
going to be a lot more
What
cleaner
was
and
the
more,
response like? Yeah.
yeah, so she's like, are you guys sure that you want to get into this? She's like, okay,
Yeah.
start small, let's try it out. And she was my
Yeah.
educator in the first 1.5 years. And if I would use,
Wow.
a dusty pink, she would tell me to use a fuchsia. And she was getting
Mhm.
her learning. She was sharing her learning. She was skeptical
Yeah.
as to what journey we are going to embark upon.
Yeah.
But, and at that time, you want to see if your thoughts were powerful enough and whether they would
Mhm.
pan out. And I think
Mhm.
with that young blood and that young energy that we had at that time, I mean, I'm not saying that we don't,
Mhm.
you're still constantly evolving, but we
Forever young.
wanted
Yeah.
to, the risks were there, but they were smaller share, because
Mhm.
it's not as if you had built out an entire business model. So I'm not going to
Mhm.
say that we had it all planned out. It wasn't a 5-year vision.
Mhm.
It was that you would experiment and you would see what the next steps would be. It was more,
Yeah. Step by step. Yeah.
step by step. You were evolving on the job. And
Yeah.
so it was a challenge that we were ready to take on. The risk was smaller share. We thought that the next steps would be of how things would pan out year after year.
Mhm.
And the success, if I may say so, was so
Mhm.
exciting right from the word go, that
That's
it
amazing.
just encouraged us to do what we were doing. And
Right.
it's not as if you don't stagnate in between. It's not as if you don't have to keep evolving. That's the thing about fashion. You can't remain stagnant.
Mhm.
It's not a recipe
Yeah.
that you created that you can just
It's a
keep implementing.
breathing, yeah, creature.
Every
Absolutely.
season, every drop brings a
Yeah.
new challenge. You know that the customer's mindset is changing. You know that they want something. You know
Yeah.
that they want you to educate them. But how much balance to keep between what the customer
Mhm.
wants and how much you want to experiment and give to the customer in terms of education. So I'll give you an example. When we
Mhm.
showcased in FCI back in SS13, I mean for spring summer 13 and 14, I remember
Mhm.
people telling us that this is way too forward for the times. Uh,
Mhm.
so, but it was so exciting to have done those shows. But it was also, the
Yeah.
feedback was that, okay, this is great, but this is a little
Yeah.
ahead of your time. And then you take a few steps
Yeah.
back. And then you
Yeah.
keep finding that balance. Till today, we are evolving and finding the balance between how much
Mhm.
aspiration that you want to build against commercial viability. In
Mhm.
fashion, you have to constantly strike that. And I think it is a unique
Yeah.
industry. And everybody thinks that about their industry, that it is unique.
Yeah.
But I truly think that fashion really is. Uh,
But
because
I
that's
love
just
what
the
you
stepping
just
stones.
said. Yeah. No,
Small
I really love what you just said. That this kind of like this trait in you and like, your peers included, the fact that you have to constantly have this seesaw balance between, the commercials of it and then the artistry of it.
Yes.
My question to you here is just, I mean, if we strip away the specifics of what you faced in the industry, I want to say this is quite a common challenge for entrepreneurs, right? At
Yes.
one point you want to kind of like stay true to your core vision and continue building and testing that product in the market, and at the other end, you have to be cognizant and mindful of the feedback and the counters that you may get to that very core business model. um, I find your brand very interesting to study because I find there's this common thread that stayed quite true to form over the last 20 years. I mean, the fact that, we've never seen grave kind of like spikes from your baseline. The baseline has been consistently minimalist. It is stylish. It's not bland, but it's also not a victim of a passing trend. The previous example
Absolutely.
that you said, it's so true because even the color palette is, as you've correctly once explained to me, it's a lot more European. So you wouldn't give me a Rani pink, but you'd give me, a pastelish pink. And I find that quite interesting about how you've managed to kind of stay true to that core over 20 years and not deviate courtesy the feedback or market sentiment, or what does the Indian customer want in, say, your trousseau collection, bridal, etc. How do you manage that? Because it is a tricky problem that most entrepreneurs face.
So, Shreya, firstly, I'm glad that we've been quite deceptive
What do
in
you
terms
mean?
of no, because it's not true, Shreya. So I'm being very candid. It's not true
Hmm.
that the brand has not fluctuated, and because we are speaking to an audience, uh, I
Hmm.
think whoever can benefit from this
Hmm.
needs to know that fluctuation does happen, because
Okay.
at the end of the day, you're in the business of fashion. You want to feel like an artist, but
Yeah.
somewhere down the line, somewhere at the end
The
of the month,
commerce has
when
to
you're
add
getting
up.
your salary checks, then you just
Yeah.
know that you need to keep the balance. And hence, in
Hmm.
any entrepreneur's life, no matter how artistic they might want to be, how clear their vision
Yeah.
might be, but I think
Yeah.
and I can say that for myself, that we did deviate. There have been years that we've deviated. And it is to constantly strike that balance, like you're asking me.
And then how do you kind of pull back then? I'm so curious to
Yeah.
hear that. Then how did you kind of like go back to that brand Bible and say, you know what, this is our core aesthetic. And of course, like 19 Bs and like +5, -5%, moving from that because it is a fluid core, right?
Right.
How do you then go back to your basics then? What kind of prompted you to explore the basics?
So, Shreya, I think what you've said for the brand, I think remains very true. We uh, uh, we haven't really deviated from our core. Right
Hmm.
from the day go, to make this contemporary, to make
Yeah.
Indian fashion, Indian heritage contemporary, was a challenge on its own. There was nothing
Hmm.
to refer to. It was,
Hmm.
you were trying to get a signature, unique handwriting without
Yeah.
having the comparatives.
Yeah.
So to distill India's heritage itself is a challenge. Till today, I find it a challenge. If I take
Yeah.
Rajasthan as an inspiration, it is such
Yeah.
complicated, beautiful,
Absolutely.
beautiful arts and crafts, but complicated. It is like you're trying
Yeah.
to decode something uh,
Yeah.
and make that simplistic and pure and unique and contemporary and relevant. So yes, we've not really shifted
Super
from
simple.
that.
Yeah.
It's not simple. It is so not simple.
Yeah,
Oh my
I
God.
know.
I think my teams also sometimes want to uh, tear their hair because I am tough
Yeah.
on them season after season.
Yeah.
And all I'm trying to say is that
Yeah.
we never really shifted from the core. But yes, we have deviated. So what you're saying, 5%, no, that's not true. We have even gone to a 20% deviation, because even make yourself successful as a business model. Now, at that time, you have the salesperson screaming down your throat. You have, the person who's managing finances pushing you from one end. And then there is that eagerness as a designer that you just want to deliver what you want to deliver. And there was deviation, but every time, every couple of years, or every year or every season, you do go back to the drawing board. And you know that till you want to go back to the core, you want to go back to the vision that you had set out. And it is not gratifying. It is not gratifying to grow if your intent and vision don't purely pan out. You have to just literally hold on to that. And you have to believe in it so strongly that the rest start believing in it with you.
Yeah,
and
it
that
has to be a very
requires
sticky
clear
story.
articulation.
Yeah,
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 and
you're right.
that always forces you to articulate that well, so that your teams are as much in tune as you
Yeah,
are in your head. If people buy into your story, when the teams buy into your story, when people
yeah,
in the organization are aligned
yeah,
and they believe in it as much as you do, then magic
yeah,
can happen. And then, even then, you're bound to face the highs and lows. It's not
yeah,
that because you believed in it, you dreamt of it, it's just going to all,
yeah,
play out so beautifully. But even
yeah,
in the lows, it's so much easier to navigate right back, because you just
yeah.
believe in something, that your teams believe in something. Corona was such a great example of that. Because you thought that you've hit rock bottom, and that you're going to be a startup all over again. But just
Yeah,
because the vision is there in front of you, that this is what you had planned, uh, you just push right back. That's what we did. We were laughing our heads off in some times and parts of the Corona months when we were all in
yeah,
lockdown. And we thought, my God, it is going back to that little unit and starting out again with
yeah,
the sailors. And
yeah.
that was all right.
That's true for
But if
most
you
businesses.
rebuild it, you'll rebuild it,
Yeah,
because you just believe in it so
yeah,
much. You've become so
yeah,
bullish about it that you will just go
yeah,
back and do it all over again. Even,
yeah.
even though you're in midlife, it doesn't matter. You want to
No,
see it through.
absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So,
I agree with you on that. And I find that like quite across industry, we've been kind of like, tracking businesses. And I feel some brands have been powering through, some have hunkered down,
yes.
and some are using this time to reassess, re-strategize, reorganize, and in some ways also rebuild their business. But the one kind of like topic that I felt like saw rapid acceleration in most conversations was the chatter around all things digital. Now, I think everyone has been talking about the need to add a digital layer to or a digital solution to your business, irrespective of whatever industry that you're in. Now, in fashion, I find that for a lot of brands, even those with online presence, they kind of like saw this unfortunate drop in traffic in orders. And a lot of businesses also thereby felt the pressure and that heat to thereby deep discount. And we all know that that could, drastically hurt a business. What kind of business advice would you have for brands who are hoping to build and stay productive? Because the truth and the reality of the situation is that this isn't going away the minute the year kind of flips to 2021. This is going to stay on for the next. It's going to see through Q2 of the next year. What advice would you have for brands who are looking to continue to build and, I wouldn't say scale, but exist?
So, Shreya, it is actually so dependent on the stage the business is at. I might give
Yeah,
a lot of advice
absolutely.
that might not apply to them. What did we do as a business? I can speak on that. It's not as
Yeah.
we went. So we have even the when your cash flows are
Hmm.
absolutely looking minimal and
Hmm.
demotivating. What we did,
Hmm.
because I'm just going back to the vision piece, trying to build a
Hmm.
luxury brand, you cannot really afford to go into deep discounting. That's the one of the things that has damaged many businesses. And
Yes.
and with going online and going digital, you know that there's a huge market that you can cater to, and you are
Hmm.
very tempted to sort of go into this discounting. But we
Hmm.
did. We went on to our end of season sale, and till date,
Hmm.
even though Corona has not been pleasant for any business, and neither has it been for ours, but we
Hmm.
have just resisted going onto a discount, and we will do it just as occasionally as we do it. It's the end of season
Yeah.
sale, and that's it.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
can I give that advice to a young brand or to a brand that is
Hmm.
suffering? I don't think I'm in a position to do that, because everybody knows their
Hmm.
finances and their businesses best. So for this time, if they
Hmm.
have to buckle and they have to go onto a deep discount to be able to see the
Hmm.
brand through for the next 5 years, then
Hmm.
that, then that's their
Then
solution.
that. Yeah.
Because
Yeah.
who's going to provide for them? It's better
Yeah.
to have the business see a hit right now, but have a
Yeah.
business for the next 5 years. Then just
Yeah. I like
uh,
that. Yeah.
yeah, restrain themselves, and then where are they? Who's supporting their finances, their financial
Yeah.
situation? So at DCI, I was so thrilled that they were trying to do that. They were trying to
Hmm.
apply, sort of take the ministry support, and I'm sure that they've done some wonders for these young brands. But beyond the point,
Hmm.
it is each person to their own, Shreya. And if they can sort of get through this hurdle for this time by
Yeah.
going into a discount, liquidating some stock, but bounce right back
So do
when times
what
are better.
really fits your brand's challenge and kind of also almost like tailor make your solution to the problem at hand. Is that your advice then?
Yes, yes,
Yeah.
because you can give the advice, but you don't
Yeah.
know the individual situation. You don't know the
Absolutely.
people who are
Yeah.
working in that company, and
Yeah.
so it it's so many aspects that you need to look at
Yeah.
as an entrepreneur. What we did is not what the next person that we know did, and each to their own in this case, because at the end of
Yeah.
the day,
Yeah.
this time was about survival. uh, and
Hmm.
if you can survive and power through
And
with
continues
your
to be. Yeah.
head up and chin up,
Yeah.
you'll be
Yeah.
able to do that in the future, and you'll be able to re-steer your business when the time's right. uh,
Yeah.
yeah.
I love that. Actually, that's the perfect amount. Like, I love advice that kind of like balances the realism and the practicality of it, and then there's like this glimmer of hope. And I love that piece of advice. Priyanka, each season, your brand kind of like, and you said this, just about a couple of questions before, it kind of draws inspiration from craft and art, whether that's from India, from across the world, and then it balances it with this common thread or this kind of like common theme where you see, bits and bobs or motifs or, notes from wildlife or architecture. Now, in line with this incredible design sensibility, can you recommend 5 absolute amazing essentials that one should have in their wardrobe?
Sorry, Shreya, I think I lost you in between. Could you just repeat the
Sorry,
last part, the last 5 seconds?
sure. So basically, I was saying that, given that there's a consistent theme that runs through all your collection, from that design sensibility, would you recommend these kind of 5 amazing essentials that we should all have in our wardrobe?
Okay, I'd love to do that actually. Um, I'll talk about this season, that what you probably must possess.
Perfect.
So we've done. a range of our classic black and whites, which we love to do season after season.
Yeah.
And no matter how bored people might be, but we still keep
Yeah.
coming back with this
Yeah.
favorite palette. So we've done this black and ivory woolen jacket that I think,
saw.
okay. And it's,
Beautiful.
yeah, so I see that you've picked up the
I'm
season.
wearing your black and white, yeah.
And that's fantastic.
I love
So
it.
happy to see you wear it as soon as you came on. So there's this black and ivory woolen jacket, and I
Yeah.
really wish that that my customer, my consumer, and I can actually flaunt that. That is one.
It
We
is a
keep doing
statement piece.
these classic saris, pre-draped saris, which are very easy to put on, and I didn't want to share this in public, but I can still not drape a sari, and that is my solution fix.
As a good Marwari girl, Priyanka.
That was the one mandate that my mother-in-law had. She said two things. She's like, just do two things before you come into this house. Learn how to wear a sari so that I don't have to drape it for you, and learn how to cook.
Yeah.
And I did neither, and I got mad.
You do you.
Hates me for it. So I cleverly
Well, I'm
said,
gonna join you at least for the sari draping. I just do my own version of it.
and she wears one in 30 seconds, and she
Oh,
drapes it so beautifully, and it's
how
always
lovely.
intimidating when she's putting it on me, but
There is someone
that's not
online,
done.
by the way, who I want to say drapes saris like
Yes.
a dream, and that's Shri.
Yes.
I think every time I mean, I see a picture of her in a sari, and you're just like either drooling and destroying your keyboard, or you're just like, how do I ask her? I want to learn from you.
Maybe the next session can be about that.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, that's a good idea.
Uh,
Okay, so that's a statement kind of, monochrome jacket. There's a
yes.
pre-date sari so that it's ease and comfort. What are your
Absolutely.
other three?
So there's this beautiful raw silk dhoti that we've done. It's more like
Ooh.
a version of a lounge, a lounge version of a bottom. So it's not exactly a dhoti and it's not exactly a formal trouser. It's a mix. So that would be a very easy yet semi-formal essential
Yeah.
to have. So these are three.
Okay.
We've done this. So it's not actually a product. It's a and I think we've done a few of those. But there's this bottle green and ivory and tan mix woolen shawl that we've done, which is beautiful to sort of around, and it's versatile, it's subtle, and you can, it's multifunctional.
I want to say for everyone, basically men, women, I mean, that would go quite well.
Yep.
Yeah.
And thinking of the fifth very rapidly. So it's an accessory, actually. It's a beautiful corset belt. It's a corded, yes, corset belt that we've done.
So good.
With, very minimal spiral fitting.
Yeah.
And waist or no waist. And I think people should just experiment with that.
That's beautiful.
Yes, no matter how diverse the size is, I think it shouldn't matter. Women should just try it. So these would be, I think,
that's amazing. Well, that's a really solid, good list. I like that. I've taken note. That's amazing. Priyanka, just as like my last question, the brand is close to completing this milestone, 20 years in the business of fashion. What can we expect from the brand in the years to come?
So actually, Shreya, I'm not going to disclose all the details, but sorry, I know this is a comma. You want to do otherwise. But by the end of the year, so we took the time out and off, and we made use of the lockdown, and we kind of did a re-envisioning exercise of our own.
Well done.
Yes, and we went deeper into our core, actually. And like I said, that sometimes you become so bullish. So even if it works or it doesn't work, at this life in your career, you want to do whatever you had planned to do. And
Absolutely. Inshallah.
so just want to build that out. The
Yeah.
teams have worked very hard. Everybody is so excited in the back end. But,
Good.
good things take time. And that's what I try and tell the others around me who are so anxious that let's do this together. Let's do it. What is
Yeah.
stopping us? Why can't we do it sooner?
Yeah.
And of course, Corona sort of made us take a few steps back. But I also blessed that time because it really made us think even harder. And I think some of the steps that would have been slightly, not well thought through, it made us pull back. And we have this gorgeous plan in place. Is going to take a lot to execute it this year. But the building blocks have started. And you should
Congratulations. It sounds amazing. I will probably try ping you on the side and say, hi, I want the details.
Yes, yeah, that you can do.
But seriously, congratulations.
To have a glimpse of that, and it'll be great to get some feedback. So
no, absolutely, and I can't wait to meet you in person the next time we meet.
Let's do that.
That would be amazing.
Yes.
But seriously, congratulations.
Let's break those rules too, and let's just
yeah. Absolutely, and thank you so much for making the time and speaking with me. I've had such a blast, and it's been such a beautiful conversation.
Yes, thank you for doing this with us.
No.
It's been an absolute pleasure.
I'm so happy. I'm so happy. Have a really good evening, and I look forward to seeing you soon.
You too, Shreya. See you very soon.
See you soon. Bye.
Bye.
That was Priyanka Modi, the founder and creative director of AMPM. I think my big takeaways from this conversation, actually, the one key takeaway has been what she said at the end, which was sometimes it's great for businesses to not only recognize the pause, but also explore and action the pause. And I think some really good, fascinating, exciting things may emerge from that pause. And I think that's exactly what the brand has seemed to have done this year by kind of like strengthening their core, which kind of very neatly goes back to how I started. And I said that's what DSSC has been doing. We've gone from DSSC to DSSC Ideas Lab just to kind of like refresh our core and kind of reorganize our ways of working. I hope you've enjoyed this conversation. Thank you so much for tuning in. For everyone who's saying amazing things, thank you so much. I look forward to seeing you next week with a fresh round of incredible conversation.